Bring you the best from all over the world. Cabin Devos, your number one live podcast. Sundays at 9 p.m. East Africa time.
All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for tuning in for Cabin Devos tonight. It's interesting. I got a message from someone today who was asking me, "Hey, David, what's going on with the live broadcasting? It's been a while since we've had live. Why? Because I traveled, and somehow the time zones have been quite different from what we are used to back home. That's the reasoning. But let me also tell you that this coming Sunday, we are going to be having Lucy is going to be back with mask off. She was talking to me earlier on this week, and I told her we're going to be covering forgiveness today, and she said that will be a good episode to do just before mask off. Why? Because the story that is coming up this Sunday, that's going to be live on Cabin Devos, is going to need a backdrop on forgiveness. But tonight I'm here with Mr. Chip Nightingale, and we're here to talk about his book Ceasefire. And I think this is I would assume it's some kind of war term where both the enemy and you have to put your guns down, relax, and take a moment to breathe. Ceasefire. I think it's about reconciliation. I love the title. Really love the title. But tonight, talking about forgiveness. My first question to Mr. Chip as we talk about the material in this book. And by the way, before maybe we can start, if I want to get this book, let's start there. Where can I find the book right now?
You can buy the book on Amazon. Mm-hmm. So all you have to do is go to Amazon, either look up my name, Chip Nightingale, and find my author page that's there. There's also a second book there that my brother wrote on 1 Peter. Or you could just look up Ceasefire, and there's some actually bad books that are in the ceasefire category, but put Ceasefire, Finding Peace When All You See Is Conflict, and you'll find it. But it is gained popularity, so most of the time when you search it, it is one of the first things that come up.
Awesome. And some of you, when you hear Amazon, you give up. Why? Because you're not used to online purchases, especially in Africa and East Africa. But let me tell you, if you have an ATM card that has the word Visa on it, you can set up a payment option. I've ordered several products on Amazon. But Mr. Chip, first question for you. What would you say is the biggest hurdle or step to take when it comes to forgiveness? And I'm asking this maybe based on conversations you've had with people, maybe counseling moments or situations that you've experienced, maybe as an individual. But what would you say is the hardest hurdle to overcome in the process of reconciliation and forgiveness?
I love this question to start off because you pointed out that, is it pride? You talked to me just recently about, is it an act of pride? And it absolutely is an act of pride, in the sense that the reason we struggle with forgiveness is because ultimately we're wrestling with the idea of whether or not we're right or wrong. And so when we think about forgiveness, and you think about someone coming to us and approaching us about maybe something that we have done wrong, immediately our response is, I didn't do that. And so the pride part of us goes, I don't know what they're talking about. I'm not going to give them forgiveness. I'm not going to say I'm sorry. I'm not going to do any of those things, because reality is that I don't think I'm wrong. Or maybe we need to be going to someone and approaching them because we have wronged them, but we wrestle with it because we're going, well, what are they going to think about me when I tell them this? And really it still stems from the act of pride. And one of the things I point out in the book, and this is something I learned after my dad passed, that the reason I struggle with conflict more than anything else is ultimately because I love myself more than I love the person that I'm having conflict with. And I began to realize that God has called me to love people the same way that he loves me, and that is unconditional. And I have to prepare my heart to love someone in order to take the steps of dealing with whatever the conflict might be.
It's interesting that you say that. My original thought as well was pride. I know pride has been the scapegoat for a lot of sins. And it's interesting that most sins actually originate from from pride. You're familiar with I don't even know who came up with those three phrases. Picking it up from Genesis and also 1 John, the pride of life, lust of the eye, and lust of the flesh. But pride of life it's huge, because she saw and she thought, this is good for gaining wisdom. I'll be like God. And I think even in this whole process, men want to be gods, to judge, number one, but also to be like the ones who own the right to forgive. And so the longer I hold on to the forgiveness, one begins to think they're holding the other hostage. And I think it was Nelson Mandela, you must have quoted him in the book. It's a very common phrase that when you hold bitterness, now I'm paraphrasing, it's like drinking poison and hoping that your enemy is the one that will die. So you're hoping that you have leverage by holding on to a grudge, but you actually don't. But it's interesting that really, I mean, if you don't have time to listen to this or the podcast today, I think this is more like the center of what we're discussing, the pride.
Interesting, what's interesting is that I was just having a conversation with someone at lunch who is asking, because of reading the book, was asking me, how do I approach this person that has offended me and done something wrong to me, but they don't even know they did. And his pride was telling him, I don't need to confront this, but the bitterness in his life is showing that he does, because that person needs the opportunity to hear that he has wronged them, so that there can be a point of reconciliation. And one of the verses I think we mess up all the time, because we always say, don't go to bed and
don't let the sun go down.
Don't let the sun go down until you have dealt with the problem. And most of the time we refer that in light of our wives, but that's not just our spouse. That's conflict, period. We're not supposed to let the sun go down, because what ends up happening is Satan now has a foothold in our lives. And we all know when he has a foothold in our lives, usually the next morning, it's our pride that begins to take over. And at that moment, we begin to have discussions within our mind that says, I don't really need to deal with this. It's okay. They don't even know there's a problem anyways. But it doesn't solve the problem within our heart. Because
so wouldn't it be easier to seize the fire at that moment? Because listen, it's possible. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I've been in that position where someone offends you and you kind of take comfort in thinking or assuming they do not know that they offended you. And you think by letting it go, there will be no fire. You understand? So there's no need to seize fire when there's no fire. But part of me thinks it's a wrong approach. Why? Because there's a fire in my heart at that point. But what are your thoughts? I mean, there's another verse that I might wrongly quote, where it says, love. What's the word? Well, love assumes the best. I'm paraphrasing that verse. It's not coming to me straight right now, but you assume the best. So you're thinking, I think there's no problem. And we confuse that with love, but also the fear of not wanting to start a fight, because you said you want to give them an opportunity to reconcile. But what if they don't? And they just add salt to the wound, using that analogy, and there's a sense of regret. I think that's the fear. I've been in that place. I do not know if that was the case with the individual you are talking to, but because I've been in that place, even with my wife, without mentioning details, there are things that happen and you feel like you're safer not bringing it up. And eventually the fire will cease by itself, where there's no oxygen, no one is fanning it. But yeah, are there moments where we can simply just let go? Should we confront every fire that starts up?
It depends if it's sin or not. Because I think most of the time we get into trouble when we determine that the conflict that we have with the individual we're having a conversation with, or maybe they did something wrong, like maybe they stole something from us, or obviously that's sin. But a lot of times the conflict we have is a personal opinion, it is not a biblical issue. And there's a difference. Just because you have a personal opinion about something that contradicts someone else, that means that now all of a sudden, now we're coming back to pride. And now I think my way is better than your way. And that's something totally different. So we have to be careful with that. But when it is sin, we have to confront the sin. And that's where the Bible is very, very clear that we are to go to our brother and we're to make this right. But there are times when we need to take a step back and go, okay, am I offended because this is sin, or am I offended because I just don't like it? And those are two totally different things.
Because you might be the one in the wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
You might be the one in the wrong.
Yeah, opinions are opinions. They really have no facts behind it. But how many times have we created problems in a relationship because of a difference of an opinion? And that's not love. That's not God's love. And just like you said at the very beginning, it's pride.
It's pride.
Yep.
Your last piece of advice there, I wish I could remember the chapter, but I think it's in the book. You actually explain the difference between a personal grudge and actually sin in that sense, and there's a huge difference. But again, I love where we're going with this. Here's question number 2, Mr. Chip. Question number 2 is, Scripture says, forgive just as God forgave you in Christ Jesus. Would you say forgiveness is a choice in terms of a decision that happens at once, where you say, I need to wake up or I need to eat? That's a decision. That's a choice. Or would you say forgiveness is a process? When the more I think about it, I think it most likely is both. But what is your inclination? An inclination means, yes, it could be both, but I'm inclined to go a particular direction. And the question is why? My suggestion is God never forgave us in steps. He forgave us once and for all. He died once and for all. And yet, sometimes when you think about forgiveness, the positive effects of forgiveness, like gaining trust, may take a while. A long while in some cases. Why does it take a while? And those are really like two questions in one. It could be both a decision and it could be a process. What are your thoughts and why?
Well, the first question, forgiveness, just as God forgave you in Christ Jesus, would you say forgiveness is a choice or a decision or a process? That question's a tough one, because our heart should always be prepared to forgive, like Christ has forgiven us. He's already forgiven us. When he died on the cross, he forgave us for our sins of our past, our present, and our future. So he's already taken care of that, but yet he still tells us to come to him and ask for forgiveness. Like, we still have to bare our souls to him and admit the fact that we're a sinner. But in that moment, he already knows whether or not we really are looking for genuine forgiveness, whether we're really sorry. And where we don't know that. And I think at times, and I don't know if you felt this before as well, but there's times where it's easy to forgive someone the first time they hurt us, and then they hurt us the second time, and now we put maybe some guardrails up. Or for me, it takes like 10 or 15 times. My dad used to get so mad at me. He's like, you forgive people too quickly. And he's right. I would let people take advantage of me over and over and over and over and over again. But then I'd get to a certain place and I'd start putting those walls up, and the forgiveness would not come as quick. But it's still a command that I am to forgive, because 70 times 7 basically is telling me I'm supposed to forgive forever, just like he forgave me for all my sins through this time on this earth. I'm still supposed to do the same thing. But what I realize is that what determines whether or not I'm going to forgive someone has to start with the act of love. It has to start with my heart for loving people. If I love people, even if it takes me time, I still need to prepare my heart to forgive. So what happens, let's take it a whole nother step. What happens if someone wrongs me, but they never come and tell me? They never say that they're sorry. Well, I think I still need to prepare my heart. And personally, I think I need to go to that person and let them know. But there's times when maybe I can't. Maybe they're on the other side of the world, and I really just can't do that because we're here together, and you're gonna leave, and we're gonna be hours and hours and hours away from each other. It'd be really hard, except through Zoom or something like that, to maybe have a conversation, and maybe all of a sudden this bitterness starts to well up within our relationship, and next thing you know, there's tension. And I think it's important for us to avoid that we need to understand that I love you and you love me, and the reason why that is that way is because Christ loves me, in spite of the fact that I'm going to make a huge mistake today. I know I am, because I pretty much do every day, and yet he's still going to forgive me for that. So I need to prepare my heart for the understanding of forgiveness. And the second question, or second idea that you kind of have here, is the positive effects of forgiveness, like gaining trust, may take a while. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's hard when you've been hurt so deeply to come to a place of realizing that you can trust again. It takes basically time after time after time of them doing the right thing to show and build that trust back up, so that I can come to the place of saying I can trust. But even in those moments, I've got a really good friend, or my wife has a really good friend, and she's been hurt by this individual so many times. And for whatever reason, she continues to be friends. But each time she gets hurt, she'll put a little bit bigger of a boundary. But for me, I put like a brick wall up. I want to protect my wife. It's like, why in the world do you keep having a relationship with this person? And the reason she does it is because she loves her. And she sees the good in her, even though I can't. All I see is this woman hurting my wife. And I want to protect, but that's not what Christ would do. Christ would give my wife the tools necessary to encourage her and love her. And so anyways, I think it's really important that we understand that there is going to be times when it's going to take us a long time to work through the process, but we still have to walk through the process.
I'm going to come back to the process part, but hearing you, this sounds impossible. I say that because pain of being hurt is real. It's so painful. Some of us in Africa have experienced pain in school, where you're being spanked for bad grades. I personally remember when I was still growing up, the math teacher would make you stand up for every number that you have failed in the homework. And we're not kids. This is high school. This is high school. And there's that pain, but we got used to it and would make fun even as we're being caned. That's how numb it had gotten. And today we look back. Today you would think you would sue the entire school. You would call that abuse or something. But the pain that is emotional, that is difficult to get to overcome. You don't just grow muscles for it. You can grow muscles for physical pain, but it's difficult to grow muscles for emotional pain. Some that have tried have ended up being isolated. They've ended up losing more than one relationship. They lose future relationships because they don't want to get hurt again. That's the scar. That's the scar that is now has lost sensitivity. And so someone reaches out, even with an act of love, and you think they want something from me because it has happened before. And here's the funny thing. You open your heart to receive that particular act of love, and when they disappoint you, it's like cutting a wound on a scar. It's more painful than the original wound. Now you talk about a process, and I remember your dad explaining the same way, and he used the analogy of a washing machine. He was talking about a different process of healing, not necessarily forgiveness. And he says, and now washing machines are not a familiar concept back home. We use our hands. But if you're washing clothes, there's a process. Depending on how dirty the cloth is, you may start by soaking it. And I know some machines do soak for a while, where the detergent sits for a while, and that dirt gets the real detergent without rushing through the rinsing process. And then depending on the function you've chosen, whether it's regular, heavy duty, it will determine how long that particular those clothes are going to wash for, and then how many times we're going to rinse, and how long we are going to dry. But he says it won't be done until each cycle is done. Meaning, you're not going to dry them until they've soaked or until they've washed the 3 cycles. There's a cycle to the process, and you have to wait until each cycle is done. Today, we might be here and we are looking at the dirty shirt. We are hoping to see a dry shirt with no wrinkles, but we don't want the process in between. And I think in saying that this has a foundation of love, yes, and I'm talking a lot, that's bad for a podcast, but this is good because you mentioned something that is very, very personal. Now, without mentioning details, I think each one of us does struggle with not wanting to be hurt again. And I think for us to go quickly through this is unfair. But what's some of the processes?
Well, interesting enough, I was something that stood out to me in 1 Peter chapter 1. He talks about the refining of our faith. And I think this is part of that process. It's the refining of our faith. The pain that you've experienced that I can't relate to. Now I got whipped by my principal, but that was mainly because I was fighting with another kid, and I deserved it. I think they called my parents. My parents told them to do that. Yeah, exactly. So that was something I deserved. But so I can't relate to that pain. And ultimately, it kind of goes to one of the questions you were going to ask me. How do you forgive someone who doesn't know the Lord? And how do you go through the process when they don't know love? They don't know God's love. They know love, but they don't know the kind of love that we're talking about. And that's complicated. But ultimately, I think what's important is that we are trusting God through the process, that we're letting Him be the one that's healing us. Because in 1 Peter, that refining is and this is so interesting because in James, the book before 1 Peter, it says, rejoice in all trials, right? Rejoice that you're getting this trial. Peter doesn't say that. He says the trial's there because he's testing your faith. He's testing the process because he wants to refine you through the process. So when we want to give up and not deal with the process, basically, we're missing out on the opportunity that God is using to refine us into who He wants us to be. So, and then He uses that description of gold, and when you heat the gold, it takes all the impurities out. So what does He do in our lives? He heats us up. He puts those things in our lives, the circumstances, like what you're talking about. And basically, He basically is saying, what God is doing is testing your faith. And if you can't work through that, then what does your faith look like? He's refining us. So even in the act of forgiveness, it's a process of refining. It's not, God gives us a command. He tells us in Matthew 18 to go to your brother that's wronged you. He doesn't say, well, if you want to.
And He doesn't promise and say, okay, when you go, forgiveness will happen instantly.
No.
He gives a process. If it does not, then
yes.
If they don't, then this.
And we can't skip the process.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We can't go, hey, David, I got a problem with my friend over here. And then I start bashing my friend to you because now you got a problem with my friend too. No, the process is I've had a problem and I need to go to my friend. Not involve you, but what needs to happen after that, though, is another process. We didn't come to a reconciliation, so I need to bring someone mature in the Lord, and not try to get them on my side, but bring them along to listen to both sides so they can help us come to a solution. And then obviously the third process is, You bring them in front of, I don't think when they say the church, I don't think church discipline is supposed to be in front of everybody. I think it's supposed to be in front of church leadership, the people that are mature in the Lord, the elders or the pastors and the deacons and the elders, and then they, through that process, come to a determination of what has happened and help us to see where the reconciliation needs to come from. And if that person doesn't want to reconcile, then it says, have nothing more to do with them. So there's a process, but at the end, it also says, if they desire to come back, you lovingly bring them back. But they have to admit their fault. And so we just missed the process. We skipped the process. We just tell everybody else about what we're mad about. And now we've just destroyed someone else's name instead of helping the process of reconciliation. Now, but coming back to the idea of someone who doesn't know the Lord, it's still important for us to tell them how we've been hurt. Or if we wronged them, imagine going to them and they don't even know, and we wronged them and said, hey, I'm so sorry for doing this. What opportunity that would bring, especially in light of the things that maybe the people that in your country have dealt with, where they go, where's this coming from? Why would you do this? And it gives you the opportunity to say, because the Lord loved me so much that he reconciled my sin by dying on the cross, and that's how much he loves you. And because of that, that's how much I love you too. It really comes back to the act of love.
Wow. And that's where it all began. I mean, he loved us that he gave his only begotten son, and it's through him that we find forgiveness. And if we truly receive that forgiveness, then I think it's Ray Pritchard that said we receive it from God to us, and then to others, And I don't think we can pass on something we don't have. Last question, second last question. The other one is just, I want to ask you to just share with us a little bit of the introduction. I think you have a very fascinating story at the beginning of the book, how you had to do and to deal with forgiveness, where even the individual didn't expect it. They recognized what they had done hurt your business, and they were ready. But they found forgiveness. We'll get to that. But how do you offer forgiveness to someone that does not need it? What I mean is they have leverage already over you. And I'm going to give this in relation to a boss and employee scenario. They really don't need your forgiveness. You're at their mercy. Whether you forgive them or not, you could get fired and they'll feel nothing. It's your boss, and your actions really don't mean much in terms of the repercussions, and yet they can snap their finger and you're gone. Your boss hurts you. They don't see what they've done is wrong, and it may actually injure your relationship if you try to pursue that kind of process. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
You went to HR and brought up this matter, for example. That's the reconciliation process in the secular world of reconciliation, not the church. Eldership can chase you out of church fellowship. Workplace is different. The process in courts is different. There's no elders you're going to go to.
Yep.
You only have the HR,
Yep.
and the HR could be is paid by your boss. Your boss.
They could be crooked. They could be on the boss's side.
Yes, they could be on the boss's side, and the repercussions are huge.
Yeah.
And I bring this up because we live in a community and a world where people have given up purpose for a checkbook, in the sense that, let me just show up to work. I don't like the environment. It's toxic. But if they're paying me, let me go just finish one more day. And there are so many grudges that we might have with people we work with. Maybe you just don't like the way they're playing loud music. You're sharing office. Your boss has mannerisms that are just annoying. I'm talking about people that do not need your forgiveness. How do you deal with something like that? I don't know. I know you work with Word of Life, and it's a Christian organization, the process is easier. But in case someone has found themselves in a weird place.
Well, I think most people are finding themselves in that position, where they're controlled by the man. That's kind of the term we use here in America. You're controlled by the man. You're controlled by the person who writes the check.
Yeah.
And I think the better question is why does God have you there? Not hey, they've wronged me and they're doing these things, or maybe they didn't pay you what you're worth, or like you said, maybe they're doing things behind the scenes that just shouldn't be happening, and all of those types of things. The thing we need to understand is in that setting, those people don't know any better. They don't know the Lord. Now, if you knew your boss and he's going to church with you, you better confront that boss. And maybe you may need to get some advice from your pastor and elder on how to walk through that process. But you still need to walk through that process. But most of the time, that's just not the case. And sometimes they may even claim to be Christians. But the reason you're there is really not for the check, even though that's why we think we're there. We're there because God put us there to be light in a world that's full of darkness. And so how can you be light if you're bitter about all the bad things that are happening in that business environment? Why would we expect anything else? It's of the world. It's of Satan. Of course it looks like that. And it's very few organizations that have secular bosses who have environments that feel godly. And the reason that God has placed that job in our lives was because that's our ministry. And we just go, well, I need it for my job. But that's saying then we don't need God to provide us for the resources to live. The truth is God still gave us the job. God's still providing the money, and it may be through this evil person, but God's still doing that. So how in the world do we function in the environment? We function in the environment by just loving them in spite of them. And I'm not saying that's easy because I'm not usually very good at that. But that is what he's called us to do. He's called us to be light in a world that's full of darkness. And if you truly love the Lord, you're going every day with the idea that maybe today is the day that someone's going to see that I'm different, and they're going to ask me why. I'll give you an example. My grandpa was a tin knocker, and that means he put HVAC systems, big ductworks in these big factories and stuff like that. And he'd climb around in all this ductwork and stuff. And my grandpa loved to sing. They called him the singing Nightingale because he would sing through the ductwork. And so his voice would ring out through the whole factory. So everybody knew that he loved the Lord. It was not a godly environment. But I ran into a guy, it was like about 5 years ago, and somehow he's connected through my family, through my wife's family. And he goes, "What's your last name?" And I said, "Nightingale." And he goes, "Chuck Nightingale? Like, do you know Chuck Nightingale?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's my grandpa. The singing Nightingale is your grandpa?" And my grandpa led him to the Lord because of his example by singing in the ductworks. He sang hymns. He didn't sing secular music. Secular music was playing throughout the whole place, but he was in the ductwork, and that ductwork would just echo everywhere. And so he was singing God's word, and people were being influenced and impacted by it. He didn't care if they didn't like it. He was singing praises to God. He was there because God called him there to have a ministry there. And maybe it's only one person that got saved, but I'd have to say after 30, 40 years of doing that job, most likely there was more than one that was impacted by the fact that he was willing to love the Lord and love them by singing to them. So, I mean, that I can't think of a better story of living out our faith in a life that would be it's hard. It can't be easy. It's got to be hard. For us, life for you can be hard right now. For me, I'm in a bubble. Life at my church was hard because there were a bunch of sinners coming in the church all the time and bearing their problems on me. and helping them work through ceasefire and dealing with their conflicts, you're at times are out by yourself, and all you hear is all this baggage and negative stuff. And so how do you work through that when you don't have, the body coming and comforting you? But then the rest of the world, they live in the world. And I can't even imagine at times the things that they go through, but God has still called us to be a light in the world.
Wow, that's amazing. But maybe just to just encourage most of us who may think you're not reaching many, when you mention maybe one got saved, it may not be many. I like to think that, I don't know the gentleman's name that was led to the Lord, but that did not just change one person. That changed the family. That guy is a husband, he's a father, and that changed the family. And if that changed the family, changed the kids and their kids. I think sometimes we fail to understand the impact that we have in one individual life because we are looking at this current timeline of this next year. We forget that we are talking about husbands, we are talking about wives, their children as fathers, that when we impact them, we're impacting generations to come. And I say that because recently I was thinking about such an impact in my own life from a lady and a couple that supported my college education through compassion. And I remember talking to her and saying, you did not only raise a David, you raised a husband, you raised a father who is now serving in ministry and discipling several others. And so your impact is more than a child who used to write to you letters. It's now to generations to come. And I do not know how many others, I can't give you a number, how many have come to the Lord through the ministry that God has allowed us to participate in. But I want to assume that they too are fathers and mothers who will impact generations to come.
Well, just thinking about Jack Wharton.
Yeah.
He played in bars. Before he got saved, he was in bars and clubs. He was in a band. And he came to know the Lord. And now, just even during COVID, 1 million young people were touched in the last year. Now, did 1 million young people come to the saving knowledge of Christ? No, but over 100,000 just in the last year came to know Jesus Christ because of the impact of one man, 75 years ago. And who would have thought that, Word of Life would be everywhere today? But he was going down the path of being a musician. And I don't think we really realize the impact of changing one life.
And so it could be that relationship we're in right now that is difficult. I think it's worth pursuing to see that there's reconciliation, because we might just change a life, which eventually will change generations. Either it's us offering forgiveness. People have taken their lives out of guilt, not receiving forgiveness. Others have gone crazy, drinking themselves mad because of guilt of not being forgiven. And it could be us holding them hostage. I think it's important that it doesn't matter whether they deserve it or not, that we offer it, both for our own deliverance and theirs too. Because one life means a lot. It matters. But hey, Chip, as we come to the end of our time here, would you like just take a minute to share with us? We'll still buy the book even after we listen to the introduction. But just go ahead and give us a brief of what that scenario looked like. I was intrigued by that introduction to your book and how you're able to overcome that kind of pain when at least then you thought everything is lost. Everything is lost. But today we look back and, of course, we're in a better place today. Not everything was lost. But just quickly take us through what happened.
Well, basically, my construction company, I had a construction company with 15 employees, and we would build, 120, 130 homes a year. And it was right before 2005 when the market was in the United States was about to crash. Nobody saw it coming because we were building homes, thousands and thousands, just like we are right now. And guess what's happening? The market's crashing again. History repeats itself. And so I was doing these six specific jobs for one company. These huge homes, huge 7,000 square feet to 10,000 square foot homes, and I had the contract on all of them. Well, needless to say, that company ended up going bankrupt, and I lost over $1 million like overnight. It was tragic. But I had this one job that I was doing for a different company, and I was like, well, this can get me through. And so as I was going through this job, I kept waiting to get paid, and I wasn't getting paid. And the stress is building up, and I've had to pay off my employees. I've had to lay them all off. I don't have any money at all to pay my house. I don't have any money to pay my cars. I don't have any money to pretty much pay for anything. And the stress level was extremely high. So I met with some pastors because I didn't believe in suing. And they actually looked at me and said, you need to sue him. And after I met with the first pastor, I went to another pastor because I was like, there's no way. That's not biblical. And his response was, you need to take care of your family. If that's what you need to do right now, you need to take care of your family. And so I went to another pastor, asked him the same question, and same response. And then I went to another one, and that same response, like, you need to take care of your... So I did. I got a lawyer, and I was going after this company to get my money back. The Lord started to work on my heart in a refining process, in that he created distance from me, and I felt lost, almost like I didn't have the Lord at all. I kind of feel like David did when after he took Bathsheba, and right before Nathan comes to him to tell him his sin. That's the way I felt. I'm sick to the bones. I thought I was dying. My wife called my dad. It's like, I'm worried about him. And, I don't know, about 3 months before, the summer was coming, Word of Life asked me to come and do a project for them. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. I was going to go to France, and I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. And the reason was because I was bitter. I was just bitter about life. But then I heard a message on something, and I don't remember the message at all. I just remember breaking down and God saying, you're not trusting me. You're not trusting me. So I went to my lawyer and said, I'm canceling the suit. And he's like, what? We're going to win. Like, this is almost over. Do you know what you're going to do? And I said, no, I need to cancel this suit. And I said, in fact, I've already set up an appointment with the company that I was suing, and I'm going to go and have a conversation with them. So I'd just like you to get the paperwork together, and I'm going to go have the conversation. And I went to the company, walked in to the secretary, said, I said, hey, I'm here to meet, his name was James. I said, I'm here to meet James, and I'd like to talk to him about a project. And so she's like, well, wait out here. And they ended up bringing me in a conference room, and he brought his lawyer with him, brought out all this paperwork and started laying out in front of me. And before I even got to say a word, he began to explain to me why he hadn't paid me yet. And I looked at him and I said, that's not why I'm here. And he went, what do you mean? I said, I am here seeking your forgiveness because I don't believe that it was right for me to sue you. And I want you to know I'm canceling my suit. I've already reached out to my lawyer. You should be getting paperwork anytime soon. But in order for me to know what God wants for my life, I believe that I needed to come to you and ask for forgiveness. And, you could just see his mouth just drop. Like the picture had to be incredible if people could have been there. And him and his lawyer, he's like, hey, he grabbed his lawyer and they went outside the conference room. I could see him because it was all glass. It's a really nice building, all glass. There's no reason he shouldn't have been able to pay. To be frank, he should have been able to pay me. But anyways, he comes back in and he goes, so Chip, what is God doing in your life right now? And I said, I just don't know. And unless I do this, I don't know. I don't think he can tell me until I get this weight off my shoulders. He goes, whatever it's going to be, I want to be a part of it. And he said, "Is there anything going on right now?" And I said, "Well, I want to go on this missions trip. They don't have money for it." And he said, "Well, how much is the project?" And I told him, and he gave me the money. He wrote a check right there, gave me the money. And even though it wasn't the money for me, that was the hard part, God had already prepared my heart that it wasn't about the money. That I was just going to trust him in it. And our relationship, even to today, is so strong that when there's times when I need certain resources or finances, he's there for me. He's definitely given more money to the ministry that I've been a part of than he ever owed me. Now, did I see it in my bank account? No. But I got to see it in God's bank account. And that changed the way I approached from that point on how to love people and how to work through conflict. Not that haven't still blown it at times, but it's a great reminder that God is in control of all things and that he'll take care of me. He took care of me. He's still taking care of me, and he still wants to take care of me.
Wow, I've read that. But you going through it again has brought up lots and lots of thoughts about forgiveness. And thank you so much. I don't want to push this any further. Let me let the listeners know that right now in Rwanda, we are thinking about doing another soccer tournament. Please be in prayer. It's going to be a huge project. I was just chatting with the team a few minutes ago, and I asked them, how many people does this stadium seat? And it seats 2,000 people. I do not know how we're going to get the monies to get this done, but we want to do a tournament. It's going to be, the first prize is going to be a cow. Second prize is going to be a goat. And the third one is going to be chickens for every player in the third team. We hope to give a scholarship to the most valuable player to attend the Bible Institute in Uganda. And then the first team will get partial scholarships to attend the next Word of Life camp that will take place in Rwanda. Now, that is huge. The company that is going to help us organize this event in setting up the media and the sound is asking for $7,000. And when you do that math, that means every person will be, in a way, equivalent to $3 for them to be a part of that particular tournament. And I know that many will hear the gospel, many will get to trust Jesus Christ for salvation. And so as we think about these things concerning ceasefire, please keep that at the back of your mind as you go to bed tonight. Whisper a prayer to God that this event will take place. It's right now in its early stages of planning, but please pray that this would be a possibility. If you'd like to reach out in one way or another, please just send me a WhatsApp. +256 code 7 91818 is my phone number. I don't usually give out my phone number, but there it goes. Just send me a message on WhatsApp and say, hey David, send me more details about this. I would like to be a part of it. Doesn't matter where you're listening in from. +256 code 7 91818 is my phone number. If you send spam messages, I will block you. It's easy. It's very, very easy to block you. But go ahead and let me know how you'd like to be a part of this. But once again, Chip, thank you. Thank you so much. Before we go, is there any thought that you would like to encourage us concerning the book?
Just that if you're struggling with some conflict right now, to really take a step back and ask God how to approach the conflict in a way that shows his love and brings the reconciliation you're looking for. I think the book will encourage you if you were to have the opportunity to get one. And I think that if we can all learn how to experience this idea of ceasefire and not exploding all the time and shooting out the missiles, I think that life will function a whole lot better.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Chip. Thank you so much, guys, for listening. Hope to see you again this coming Sunday. Remember, we are having Mask Off with Lucy. Brand new story on how to deal with issues. Biblical counsel will be given. And it's interesting that this is a backdrop. Forgiveness is a backdrop to what's going to be taking place this coming Sunday on Mask Off. See you soon. Have a great night. And bye-bye.
Bring you the best from over the world. Cabin Devos, your number one live podcast. Sundays at 9 p.m. East Africa time.